I'm Elisa Parenti from Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump welcomed Vietnam's Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc to the White House today. Trump says the two plan to discuss trade. Billions of dollars in business deals are expected to be signed at that meeting. The Prime Minister is the first leader from Southeast Asia to visit the White House. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer says President Trump has spoken with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani about the massive truck bomb that killed nearly 100 people in Kabul. Authorities say a suicide bomber drove into Kabul's heavily guarded diplomatic quarter during the morning rush hour in one of the worst attacks since the drawdown of foreign forces in 2014. CNN reports former FBI Director James Comey plans to testify publicly in the Senate as early as next week. CNN also reports that Comey has spoken privately with special counsel Robert Mueller to work out the parameters of his testimony to ensure there are no legal entanglements. President Trump fired Comey this month as the FBI was investigating Russian influence in the presidential election. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. From Washington, I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg, and Bloomberg Technology is next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, it is decision time on climate change. Will the U.S. back out of the landmark Paris Accord? We'll break down Silicon Valley reaction and the fight against global warming without America leading the charge. Plus, the AI war hits home with Apple set to roll out smart speakers. But Cupertino is playing catch-up in the race for a connected device on your kitchen counter. Can Apple close the gap with Amazon Echo and Google Home? And cyborgs arrive at Morgan Stanley to back up its 16,000 financial advisors. But are they really an upgrade over the Wall Street wave of robo-advisors? We'll discuss. First to our lead. The Paris Climate Accord could be in trouble. It was just 2 years ago, nearly 200 nations, including the United States, agreed to voluntarily reduce their fossil fuel emissions in an effort to combat climate change. In President Obama's terms, it was a step in the right direction.
This is the moment we finally determined we would save our planet. Is the fact that our nations share a sense of urgency about this challenge and a growing realization that it is within our power to do something about it.
Now, President Trump is considering whether to keep the U.S. in the landmark Paris Accord, but could be leaning towards an exit. Earlier Wednesday, Trump tweeted, "I will be announcing my decision on the Paris Accord over the next few days. Make America great again." And Silicon Valley has responded, with Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeting, "Don't know which way Paris will go, but I've done all I can to advise directly to the president through others in the White House and via councils that we remain." Musk also stated he will depart the president's council if the U.S. pulls out of the climate deal, importantly. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Chris Martin, who covers renewable energy, and Amy Grace, head of North American research for Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Amy, I'll start with you. What are the real implications if the U.S. pulls out?
So the Paris Accord will go on with or without the U.S. in it. I think some of the implications for the U.S. are actually not that much. So in U.S. emissions targets, if you think about the U.S. emissions in terms of breaking it down into the power sector emissions, is about 40% of emissions, transport emissions, which are another 40%, and then the rest of the economy, which makes up 20%. Power sector emissions will meet the Paris Agreement targets without actually the Paris Agreement or without the Clean Power Plan, which is the legislation to get the U.S. there. On the transport side, it's a slightly different story. So pulling out the Paris Agreement in and of itself won't do anything to the transport targets, but on the table now are changes to the fuel emissions standards, which are under review. A relaxation of those emission standards could actually mean that the U.S. misses the transport portion of those emissions targets, which ultimately means the U.S. would miss their Paris emissions targets.
Chris, if the U.S. pulls out, though, how likely is it that other countries then follow suit?
Well, so far it looks unlikely. You know, we're most concerned about India and China at this point, and they both pledged their allegiance to the Paris Accord. So we haven't seen anyone pull out of the accord, and to this point, the U.S. has not either. So it's not clear yet whether anyone will.
Why would, hypothetically, the U.S. want to pull out and, be in the same boat as other nations that are not participating, including Syria and Nicaragua?
Well, I think for the Trump administration, it's a promise he made during his campaign to increase demand for coal. I don't think that's going to come out of this. In fact, our reporting today showed that shares of coal companies actually went down on the news today. So it's not clear who would benefit.
I think I would just add to that, there's a long list of UN conventions that the U.S. has not signed, including, a nuclear test ban treaty, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and other, the International Climate Court, or International Criminal Court, rather. So this wouldn't be the first.
What do you think, Chris, of Elon Musk's tweet that he will drop off of Trump's advisory council if indeed this happens? This is, of course, the man who founded a major electric vehicle company, Solar City, in the mix as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a signal of frustration with the administration that there's a need to be a part of this global climate pact. And if you do not, if you pull out, then it's a signal that we're not serious about climate change, and that would be unfortunate.
Amy, what would it actually mean for the fight against climate change realistically? I mean, some have said that this could be catastrophic, but is that a gross exaggeration?
I would say it's a gross exaggeration. I think it will take the wind out of the sails of the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord will go on, but it essentially reduces the incentive to continue ratcheting up. It probably delays it by about 5 years. I think, the probably broader implications are the questions of this Green Climate Fund. They're intending to raise about $100 billion per year for the developed countries to give to developing countries. They don't know where that money is going to come from. So far, they've raised about $10 billion, $3 billion of which is from the U.S. $1 billion of that $3 billion the U.S. has already paid. The other $2 billion is in question. So, whether or not they drop out of the Paris Accord, it's probably unlikely that that $2 billion is going to be forthcoming from this administration. But it certainly doesn't help to pull out of the Paris Accord.
So, if this happened, Chris, what do we know about how the U.S. would actually unwind its support? Would this be a gradual thing? Would it be abrupt?
It would take a few years for them to actually unwind this. So I think that you would see, gradual progression, and that can change with the next administration too. This is an executive order rather than an approved treaty, so it wouldn't take much for the next president to get back in.
Yeah, I would just add that it would essentially take to the end, basically November of 2020 for them to fully pull out, but the impact is immediate.
So is it simple or is it complicated? Chris?
It's complicated. And I don't think we're going to see any answer over the next few days, even if Trump decides to pull out. The reaction is going to be muted because people need to figure out how long it's going to take for changes to be made. I think it's going to take years.
Amy, what would it mean for shifts in alliances? I mean, obviously, if China and India remain, how does this affect our relationship with other countries?
I don't think it actually will have a big impact on relationship with other countries. I think if the U.S. were a smaller country and they were pulling out, of course, then you might have broader political ramifications. But the reality is the U.S. is a pretty big part of all international negotiations. So they're going to have a seat at the table regardless of what they decide in the Paris Accord.
All right. Amy Grace of Bloomberg New Energy Finance, Chris Martin, our Bloomberg News reporter. We're obviously going to continue to follow this and await President Trump's decision. Hewlett-Packard Enterprises reported its second quarter results after the bell. Earnings came in line with estimates, despite warning of current headwinds. The company reported sales in the period totaling $9.9 billion, but that includes the enterprise services business, which has been discontinued. But the company gave a profit forecast that fell short of estimates for the current quarter, as the company struggles to shift to the competitive field of cloud-based services. A story we are watching: the massive legal spat between Toshiba and Western Digital over the sale of the memory chip business is getting even more complicated. Toshiba sent a letter to Western Digital saying it's moving assets from the joint venture back to the parent company. That's after previously transferring them to a subsidiary in preparation for the sale. Western Digital is seeking to block the chip unit sale after it became clear the operations may fall into the hands of competitors. Coming up, after Uber fires Anthony Lewandowski, we are taking a closer look at Alphabet's Waymo and where it stands in the crowded driverless car race. And just a reminder about our new interactive TV function. Find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to it. You can send our producers a message. You can ask me a question. You can play along with the charts that we show you on air. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Former hedge fund manager Phil Falcone was barred by the SEC in 2012. Now he's back and putting his money to work. He sits down with Bloomberg's Betty Liu in a rare exclusive interview and discusses how private equity stacks up against the hedge fund world.
When looking at some of the different investments I've had over the years, the most success I've had is buying things that have taken a long time, that you can, I don't want to say incubate, but you can help nurture and grow and fix and twist and turn. And that's tough to do in the hedge fund model. And you can do it in the private equity model, but it's still a little bit different. I think this structure gives us the flexibility that we need and really gives us the opportunity to hopefully never have to sell any of these companies that we control.
Now, to the firing of Anthony Lewandowski from Uber. This particular saga has fallen under a microscope as the self-driving industry has exploded over the last several years. So how will the Lewandowski case impact the future of Alphabet and Uber's self-driving car efforts? Will it spark a talent war for other star engineers? For more now, we're joined by Brad Stone, our senior executive editor at Bloomberg Tech and author of The Upstarts, a book about the founding stories of Uber and Airbnb. So let's start with Waymo. Is this really a turning point, this lawsuit?
I don't think the lawsuit is a turning point. I mean, the lawsuit shows that they're willing to leverage or exploit their intellectual property. Google was first in the driverless car arena. I think it's actually was Uber's emergence as a driverless car player that was the turning point for Waymo. It moved Waymo from a kind of academic orientation to an operational one. They are now on the road with SUVs and minivans in Phoenix, right? They're signing people up. They know that they have to be not just for for the data, but for their own engineers who want to see cars on the road, that they have to be out there. Google also spun off Waymo as its own independent division and put John Krafchick, the former CEO of Hyundai, in charge of it. So I think the competitive pressures are the turning point.
If they somehow manage to cripple or stall Uber's self-driving efforts, then is it a benefit to Waymo?
Well, of course, but there are a lot of players here. In fact, way too many. I think Mark Andreessen yesterday said in his presentation at the Code Conference that there were almost comically too many players out there, from Tesla to all the car companies. So, hurting Uber a little bit hurts a primary rival, but it doesn't change the fundamental dynamics, which is that Waymo has a head start. And this is many years away from happening, and we'll see how it plays out.
Talk to us about what's going on behind the scenes when it comes to talent. These engineers are incredibly in demand. They have a very specialized skill, and who gets the best engineers may, in fact, determine who ends up on top.
Well, if anything, it seems like this is all hurting the big players, right? Because there are folks like Chris Urmson, who used to run the self-driving car division at Google, striking out on their own, right? Anthony Lewandowski showed, seemingly, that there was great profit in going and creating a startup and maybe getting acquired. So Urmson left Google last year. He's got his own company. Google's probably has a deep bench. But like they certainly are losing people. Then again, earlier this year, they came out and they said that they had shrunk the cost of LiDAR, that key mapping component in driverless cars, by 90%. So clearly they keep moving the technology bar forward despite losing some engineers.
And beyond the technology, what about partnerships? Is Waymo actually seeing any momentum?
Right now it's interesting. They've got the Fiat Chrysler partnership. They're making the SUVs in Phoenix. Beyond that, there was a rumored deal with Honda. It hasn't come to fruition yet. There's the deal that they announced with Lyft. We'll see how that's implemented. Mark Fields, who left the top job at Ford this week, was in part lost a job because he wasn't able to come to terms with Google on a driverless car partnership. So the one point I want to make here is that it's quite unusual for any of these tech companies to do big, broad deals with other companies, right? They have partnerships with advertisers, but in terms of sharing the data, sharing the profits, it just gets really messy. And so I'm not sure that Waymo, really, despite the Fiat Chrysler deal and this promising Lyft deal, really, has showed much progress here.
Morgan Stanley came out with a report saying that if spun off, the Waymo business could be a $70 billion business. Is there any indication that Alphabet would ever do that?
They said by 2030. So where will you and I be by 2030?
Let's not think about
That's
it.
a long way away. As Gil Pratt from Toyota said also earlier this year, we're nowhere near level 5 autonomy in driverless cars. Like, we don't really know how this is going to roll out. I think that projection from Morgan Stanley was optimistic, assumed a lot of things. Does Waymo, will it be valuable one day? It will if they can deploy driverless cars safely on the road. And the key word, of course, is safely.
All right. Brad Stone, our Bloomberg executive editor for tech, thanks so much for joining us. Another earnings update. Box reported its first quarter earnings report after the bell today, coming in above revenue expectations, bringing in around $117 million, up 30% year over year. More importantly, Box touted that it has now become free cash flow positive, a signal that the company may be en route to being a profitable rival to competitors like Dropbox. We'll discuss the earnings results along with international expansion plans tomorrow with Box CEO Aaron Levie right here on Bloomberg Television. Coming up, Apple is gearing up to take on Amazon Echo and Google Home. We'll bring you all the latest details on its new Siri-connected speaker next. This is Bloomberg. Nest Labs has finally ended an 11-month product drought. The latest gadget is a revamped high-end security camera called the Nest Cam IQ. It is the first redesigned camera since it acquired that startup Dropcam in 2015. And this newest camera has some tech upgrades. It shoots higher resolution 4K video that allows users to more deeply zoom into footage without losing as much clarity as the current version. And the camera lens will automatically pan to follow a person in the view as they walk around the room. Apple is said to be on the verge of introducing a Siri-controlled smart speaker. This according to people familiar with the matter. The device would rival Google Home and Amazon Echo, both of which have already made some major inroads into homes around the world. It's just another drumbeat as Apple prepares for its Worldwide Developers Conference next week. Joining me now here in the studio, our Bloomberg Tech Apple reporter, Alex Webb. So what do we know?
So we know that this is in production, that Inventec, which is a Taiwanese company, has started making these things. There's a very good chance that it will be unveiled next week, ready to be introduced to the market to actually go on sale later in the year. I think that is kind of interesting, given that Amazon has just introduced their latest Alexa with a screen, the Alexa Show. What we're hearing is the Apple product will not have a screen. It's solely a speaker. So that's clearly a slight difference from what's already on the market.
But there are some interesting details that you guys have found in terms of what might set this apart when it comes to the sound and its ability to understand what's going on in a room. Tell me about that.
That's the kind of differentiator that it seems Apple is hoping to make. That Amazon and Google have got these well-established products. Apple clearly seems to think that having a better quality speaker will give them an edge. There are things like surround sound, which is sort of beamed out from the device, and an ability perhaps to follow the shape of a room and therefore adjust the acoustic performance accordingly.
So you say the surround sound might be louder, might be crisper. It would also somehow be able to determine how loud the volume is in the room and how loud this speaker needs to speak, essentially.
Yeah, exactly, and it can adapt to some of the acoustics. And this would clearly hint towards an effort from Apple, as they always do with any hardware, to make it a premium product. If you look at the pricing of the Amazon Alexa, they do not make much or any profit on that thing. They do it as a sort of loss leader almost to get people buying Amazon products or products through Amazon.com. That is not typically the Apple business model. They want to make the money on the hardware. They're trying to do more in services and software, but the pricing will be interesting to see what their ambition is.
Now, importantly, this will connect with other Apple devices and potentially progress Apple's strategy within the home in general, right?
Exactly. So there are two elements to this. On the one hand, Apple has HomeKit, which is the way that you can control home automation devices, smart devices like your lighting, like your blinds, those kind of ideas. And at the moment, if I were to want to control the lighting at my home remotely, I've got to have a hub in my home, so I can't do it from here. Now, that hub can be an Apple TV, it could be an iPad, and crucially, it's likely also then to be this speaker. The other side is, of course, the defensive element. If you have an Amazon Alexa or you have a Google Home, the odds are for your music, for example, you're listening to either Spotify, Amazon Prime Music, or Google Play. You're not listening to Apple Music. And these kind of service products are ones that Apple's really pushing and trying to build a more dependable revenue stream, and this helps preserve that.
Now, Apple wasn't the first to market with a tablet, wasn't the first to market necessarily with a smartphone, and Steve Jobs made a point of that, but, you know, historically, you know, Apple has often been the best to market with some of these products. Are we expecting this to be an example of that?
Well, it's very hard to judge at this stage. I think with relevance to that question, it is particularly important to see what the pricing is going to be. Now, it could be the best, it could also be $100 more expensive. We don't know. But if it's not $100 more expensive, that then shows they're probably not making a 40% margin on the product. They are expecting to make more money down the line with their services. Now, if it is more expensive, then they've clearly got to be doing something to convince you or me or whoever it might be to buy their product and not the significantly cheaper ones from Google or Amazon. The Google one's $129. There's a big difference.
Now, the connected home sounds great. It sounded great for a couple of years. It still really hasn't hit the mainstream. It's still pretty hard to connect your home. I mean, what is it going to take for that to be an easier process?
I think at the moment, if you look at a lot of the products that are out there, people are seeing this as an opportunity to get big profit margins. So, you know, an LED light from Philips Hue is their connected product. It costs something like upwards of $25. I think it's $49 for the one which is many different colors. Now, the classic LED light is significantly cheaper than that. So they're all sort of sensing an opportunity to make big margins there. Until that ceases to be the case and it becomes as affordable as any other kind of lights, I mean, I'm picking a lighting example, could apply to any number of different categories. That's, I think, going to be the delta that needs to be crossed in order to make widespread adoption a reality.
All right. We'll see if this is unveiled at WWDC next week. That is the suspicion. Alex Webb, our Bloomberg News Apple reporter, thanks so much for that update. Coming up, Mary Meeker's annual Internet Trends Report has dropped. We'll dive into what has become essentially the State of the Union for the tech industry next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. CNN reports former FBI Director James Comey plans to testify publicly in the Senate as early as next week. CNN also reports that Comey has spoken privately with special counsel Robert Mueller to work out the parameters for his testimony to ensure there are no legal entanglements because of his testimony. President Trump fired Comey this month as the FBI was investigating Russian influence in the presidential election. Top executives warned of business backlash should President Trump withdraw from the U.S. from the Paris Accords. Tesla's Elon Musk, Apple's Tim Cook, and Dow Chemicals' Andrew Liveris all appealed to the president to stay in the climate agreement. Some 25 companies, including Microsoft and Intel, have also signed a letter requesting access to clean technology. The letter will run as a full-page ad in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal tomorrow. The president has tweeted that a decision will be announced in the next few days. UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn admonished Prime Minister Theresa May for not joining a general election debate tonight. May has refused to do any live TV debates, and Corbyn had previously said he would not take part without her, but now we've got a last-minute change of plans. He was joined at the debate by representatives of the UK's smaller parties. Sri Lanka's got a death toll that's growing from mudslides and floods. We'll have more on that later. But for now, global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Wednesday here in Washington, 7:30 Thursday morning now in Sydney. We are joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Elisa. Well, ASX futures looking rather tepid again, off about 8 points right now as the market waits on retail sales data for the month of April. Been a rough old ride for Australian retailers over the past few months. The ASX has been underperforming globally, and within that stock, the retail sector has also been underperforming. We are expecting an increase in retail sales of 0.3% for April, but then again, we forecast the same for the past 2 months and got 2 months of contraction. Elsewhere, Nikkei futures are pointing modestly up. We're waiting on first quarter capital spending out of Japan and out of China. A big one today. Taishin PMI, official PMI on Wednesday, remained positive. This private survey of PMI expecting to show manufacturing contracting to 50.1 from 50.3. A couple of data points to watch out of South Korea as well, with trade numbers and consumer prices for May. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Kleiner Perkins partner Mary Meeker just unveiled her widely followed Internet Trends Report for 2017. The closely watched 355-page report covers everything from the cloud and internet advertising to wearables and music subscription. A major takeaway from this year's report, the rise of online ads, with global internet advertising expected to pass TV within 6 months. And Google and Facebook are reaping the benefits, with their combined share of online ads amounting to a whopping 85% and rising. Joining us now from New York to discuss, our Bloomberg Intelligence U.S. Director of Research, Paul Sweeney. So first of all, Paul, online surpassing TV in 6 months. Do you buy it?
Absolutely, I do. We've seen the trajectory over the last 10, 12 years where we've got TV ad spending growing about 4 to 5% a year. But digital ad spending growing 15 to 20% a year. So the lines are just about to cross here this year. And I think if you look at the forecast over the next several years coming from various forecasters, continued upward trend in internet ad spending. Again, double-digit growth versus television in the low single digits.
So what does it mean for everyone else if Facebook and Google are getting the lion's share of the pie?
Yeah, if I'm an advertiser or the ad agencies representing big advertisers, I'm worried because I have a market where there really is a duopoly between Facebook and Google. I only have 2 buyers or two platforms to allocate my ad dollars. That is not a good market structure, market dynamic. And so what we're seeing is of the incremental ad dollars that are going to the digital marketplace, again, Google and Facebook are taking just about everything. So it's really a challenge for some of the smaller platforms. Think Twitter, think Snapchat. Having 200, 300, 400 million users on your platform these days just is not enough. When you take a look at Google, you take a look at Facebook, each of Facebook's platforms is at or above 1 billion users when you think about Facebook and Instagram and Message. So it's just a tremendous reach vehicle. And what we're seeing is these big platforms like Google and Facebook are really starting to target television advertisers because that's where the money is.
Now, something else that Meeker called out is that the measurement of the impact of online ads is still very much lacking. Also, the placement of ads is sometimes rather suspect. Perhaps they might pop up next to offensive content. What do you make of some of these potential headwinds?
These are significant risks, and they're highlighted by not only advertisers, but the ad agencies that represent them. Measurement and context and placement are really the 2 big issues that these internet companies really have to figure out. That being said, the dollars are still going to digital. So, what's interesting, we're going to have a big data point coming out of the television industry over the next couple of weeks when they sell about 75 to 80% of their inventory in what's called the upfront market. And 18 or 19 or 20 billion dollars will be allocated to television. The expectation is that TV ad spending in the upfront will be flat to down. And again, let's think about what's happening at Facebook and Google. They're seeing their revenue, their top-line advertising revenue grow 20% plus. So you just have to compare those two markets, and you can see where advertisers are going despite some of their concerns.
Now, on a slightly different topic, she also called out Amazon and talked about how it's changing the face of retail, which we know, but Mary Meeker specifically pointed to Amazon baby wipes, Amazon batteries. These are products that Amazon is branding itself and selling to consumers. What impact is that having on the retail landscape?
It's having a big impact. I think, you know, when you get to private branded products, it just shows you the strength of Amazon in the retail marketplace. So not only have they disrupted the entire bricks and mortar retail, but now they're really starting to think about how they position themselves within the retail market in certain verticals. So when you think about Amazon, Jeff Bezos has shown really over the last 20 years that he will make any investment that he thinks will grow his business long term, because he believes obviously that retail sales going to online will grow from today's average of about 7 to 8% to well over 10%, and he needs to be a part of that and be really the leading player there. So we've seen this company make tremendous amounts of investments across their businesses because they believe in the long-term story.
All right. Our Bloomberg Intelligence U.S. Director of Research, Paul Sweeney, thanks so much for weighing in. Well, the 16,000 financial advisors at Morgan Stanley are about to get some cyborg help. The new machine learning algorithms will take over various tasks to help out employees. The bank is selling the rollout to wealthy clients as a more comprehensive upgrade compared to robo-advisors. For more, we're joined now by our Bloomberg News finance reporter Hugh Sun in New York. So Hugh, first of all, how is this different than what already exists when it comes to AI helping human traders?
Well, what already exists in wealth management is robo for the most part. So a very simple asset allocation algorithm. Maybe it has tax loss harvesting built into it, but a fairly straightforward platform for people, generally speaking, who have less than $1 million, right, in assets to invest. What they are calling, and you know, what's emerging as kind of a cyborg model is man with machine. So financial advisors equipped with algorithmic assistance, which will, you know, hopefully make them smarter. When you think of a cyborg, you think of somebody who's faster and stronger and can do things better. And the hope is this will keep the human advisors, better equipped to handle the very wealthy clients that they have, and keep them happy and sort of keep the robots at bay, right?
Now, we were speaking with Kai-Fu Lee, the former head of Google China, a big investor now in China, who said that AI can now do some of these tasks better than any private banker can do, which reminds him now to fire his private banker. So, you know, to what extent are these new technologies going to replace humans in the future? Honestly,
that's a question I asked every executive I talked to for this story. You have to think about, what does a computer do better than a person? What does a person do better than a computer? If I'm a very wealthy person, I've got $5 million at Morgan Stanley, and something in my life happens, say, God forbid a parent dies or they have to get into long-term care. Well, I don't want, the Stephen Hawking voice to call me and say, and try to empathize with me. I would hang up immediately, right? So there's still things, particularly the more wealthy you are, the more kind of high touch you want to be, there's still things that you need human beings for. Now, you just need those human beings, the thinking goes, to be smarter. You need to have algorithmic assistants tell you just when is the right moment for me to engage with this person. So Morgan Stanley is rolling out some machine learning capabilities that will actually ingest all the interactions that they have, that the advisor has with their client, to try to get smarter and know what that client really wants.
How does risk factor in here? Is it preventing banks from adopting AI more quickly?
Well, I mean, AI obviously is just huge, I think specifically, financial firms have been really late to adopt a lot of the technologies. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were like, this sounds like something they should have done years ago, and they're probably right. I think it's actually, in the onset, so we're going to see AI come up more in sort of capital markets. Investment bankers are going to start to be using more and more AI. You're going to be interacting with AI when you're working with a bot, for the retail customer. So it's going to happen a lot more, as the years go by, and it's going to be something that probably replaces some of the humans you've been dealing with.
All right, our Bloomberg News finance reporter, Hugh Sun. Hugh, thanks so much for that report. Coming up, could new airport scanners end the latest debate over allowing laptops on flights? We'll take a look into the company that says it's got all the answers next. This is Bloomberg. JetBlue is about to launch a first-of-its-kind boarding program involving facial recognition. Passengers won't need boarding passes. They'll get their picture taken at the gate. And that image will be matched to those on file with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. JetBlue will start testing the process on flights between Boston and Aruba. We continue to wait on a final decision on whether an American ban on laptops in airline cabins will be expanded to include flights from Europe. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly said in a call with European Union leaders that the proposed expansion was, quote, still on the table, according to an emailed statement. In March, the U.S. barred electronic devices larger than a mobile phone from airline cabins on flights bound for America from 10 Middle Eastern and North African airports. While a final decision hasn't been made, one company says they may have a solution. Integrated Defense and Security Solutions has developed a new scanning machine that has passed initial U.S. government testing. Joining us now from Washington, Joseph Parisi, CEO of Integrated Defense and Security Solutions. So, Joseph, first of all, how are your scanning machines better than the technology that's already deployed?
Okay, let me explain. It's very similar to medical technology. If you go and you get an X-ray, that X-ray will give you a certain amount of information. But when you had a CAT scan, you're looking at the body from all different angles in 3 dimensions. So you're really analyzing much more detailed data and able to use that information with algorithms that can analyze the material content and then determine whether an item inside the bag is a threat.
So how can your technology better determine if a laptop has a problem?
Well, because we have the resolution to look for the types of explosives that TSA is interested in finding, we're kind of breaking the bag in, slicing and dicing is like the way I like to put it. So if you think about breaking the bag into little cubes, which are volumes or voxels, volume elements, and measuring the density and the material characteristics of each one of those cubes, and then putting together all the common ones into an object, the ones that are touching, then you know something about the material characteristics and whether it matches that of an explosive. And based on the fact that you know the size of it, you know whether it's large enough to be of concern, that it's large enough that could cause an explosion on an aircraft. So it's really quite advanced from a simple X-ray machine, which is just showing you 2 different angles. In the United States and most of Europe, it's only using one projected image. Very, very difficult for any officer to find an explosive material in an object inside a bag like that.
Now, as I understand it, you believe that banning laptops will just encourage terrorists to, work on other ways to, threaten our safety and security. But if laptops are any question, devil's advocate would say, shouldn't we be as cautious as possible?
Well, one wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, I think that when you're going to do what's being contemplated by Secretary Kelly right now to ban the laptops, you're going to also put a major inconvenience on a number of people and their ability to do business. So is there technology that could help keep those laptops in an aircraft and do that in a manner that can provide the same level of safety, if not better? Being able to analyze it is better than assuming that if I have a laptop, it's safe because I've taken it away from the passenger. What stops the terrorists is still put explosives inside that laptop, and now you're just putting it into another section of the aircraft where it still can explode, still can cause a fire, and still be a threat to the aircraft's flight.
So where is the United States when it comes to certifying your technology?
So the United States and Europe have a certification standard. We have passed both of those standards for certification. In the United States, they go one step further, really evolved into let's make sure it's ready for operational deployment in an airport before we put it into an airport. That's called a qualification process, where they validate over 500 different items to make sure that your system meets all the different criteria: safety, power, data collection, operator interface, tools that the operator would use to look through the bag, and so forth. And we're in that process right now and hope to be done sometime this summer. And we are in parallel going into Logan Airport on June 14th. That'll be live there. And so we're not just standing still. TSA is moving forward. While they're finishing their operational evaluation, they're also putting it into airports to examine it in a live operation.
Now, quickly, there's momentum behind next-generation screening lanes, computerized conveyor belts. How would your systems work with that new technology?
Yeah, these systems, which are called smart lanes or automatic security lanes, are really more of a human factors improvement, where you're providing a way for multiple passengers to come up at the same time, grab a tray, put their stuff into a tray, put the tray on a belt, run it through the system. After it's been scanned, it automatically diverts if there's something is found, or it sends it back to the passenger. And some instances that's shown a 30% improvement in throughput because you're now sort of organizing the way that people put things. We're integrated with almost all of those vendors, but it has nothing to do with security. Security is really done within the scanner that is examining it for the explosive material.
Okay. Integrated Defense and Security Solutions CEO Joseph Parisi. Fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, Waze sets its sights on LA with plans to roll out its carpooling app in the congested city. We take the service out for a test drive next. This is Bloomberg. Waze is expanding its carpooling app across California. The Alphabet-owned mapping and navigation company has been testing the service here in San Francisco and in Israel, and plans to launch in Brazil. Its ride-sharing platform operates more like a traditional carpool, where the driver and passengers have similar origins and destinations, unlike Uber and Lyft, where drivers pick and drop off riders wherever it's requested. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde took a drive with Josh Freed, head of carpooling business at Waze.
Well, hello.
Hello.
What a nice ride.
Thank you.
Perfect. Happy carpooling, hey?
Yeah.
How many people are using this already?
So tens of thousands of people have registered. It's a two-app platform. So there's Waze and Waze Rider, which is our rider app. So millions of people have already downloaded Waze, and all they need to do is opt in to carpool. And then on the rider side, we had tens of thousands of people have downloaded that app. And we have thousands of carpools happening every week in the Bay Area.
Why are people using Waze already in terms of carpooling? What is the need? Is it work? Is it play?
Yeah, so we're really trying to connect commuters who are who either don't have a lot of options or are tired of driving or have limited parking at their workplace. We're connecting commuters who are going in the same direction and who have similar origins, similar destinations, their neighbors, their friends, their colleagues, and simply taking cars off the road.
And what about the money exchanging hands here? How much are you getting reimbursed for taking me? How much am I paying you?
Sure. So it's a not-for-profit share the expense carpool. These aren't actually for-profit drives like ride sharing. So you'd get, as a driver, up to 54 cents a mile, which is the federal limits on gas and expenses for driving. And the rider will pay no more than that as well. So for a 10-mile ride, it'll probably be around a $5 exchange between rider and driver, and Waze is facilitating that. So as a rider, you give us your credit card number. As a driver, you register a bank account with us, and we do the transaction behind the scenes.
Why else is Waze doing this? This is not making the money, or is it? Is it the data?
Obviously, there's a financial component in the future. Today, we're not taking any commissions on matches, but at some point, when we reach higher density and our quality of service is where we want it to be, we could take a small commission off of every match as well.
And then the data you're getting out of it, where is that of interest?
Yeah, so definitely data is important to Waze. The more people who are using Waze, the better Waze gets for everyone. So with something like Carpool, where we can tell where your home is and where your work is and your regular sort of commute patterns, that helps us with routing for everyone. That helps us tell cities that we work with, here are your origin places of density, your destination places of density. We work with, I think, 250 different cities around the world to help them solve their traffic problems.
How does it play into the greater scheme of Alphabet as well?
At this point, we're not working, directly with any other entities on Carpool within Alphabet. It's very much a Waze project and something that we hope is important to the future of Waze.
How is the competitive landscape to a certain extent?
At this point, it's really early days. There's a few startups working on carpooling. Lyft and Uber have experimented with true carpooling models, but they haven't really stuck.
Where do you see percentages going? You say it sticks around 8 to 10%. Do you have a viewpoint on where carpooling can really be?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all see a future where there's a lot fewer cars on the road and potentially they're driving themselves. So I think all of us will be getting into self-driving cars someday. I think that today, if we can convince double-digit percentages in major cities to carpool, then it will have a viewable, measurable impact on congestion.
That was Joshua Freed, head of the carpool business at Waze, and Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. On Thursday's show, we'll be speaking with Adam Coates, director of Baidu's Silicon Valley AI Lab. And all episodes are, of course, live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.